Serge, c'est une personne que j'ai toujours respectée. On a toujours travaillé très étroitement ensemble.
Tonight, two political heavyweights square off in the battle for top chief in Quebec.
I bring a different voice, sometimes a little forceful, but I think it's needed.
Plus, record overdose fatalities in the Yukon are no surprise to this community member.
So the whole thing about this, about the opiate crisis and all of this, it should have been done years ago.
It's just a one-tap instant access.
And hearing from your band council is now easier with this new app. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Stay the course or change direction. That's what First Nations chiefs of Quebec and Labrador will try to decide tomorrow. Innu Ghislain Picard and Mohawk Serge Simon will face off for the title of Regional Chief of Quebec and Labrador. Amelia Fournier has more.
This was the scene 3 years ago. Ghislain Picard once again winning an election and being congratulated by Serge Simon. Now they're running against each other in this year's election for the Regional Chief of Quebec and Labrador. Picard has held the position since 1992.
L'essentiel du message, c'est que s'il y a une démarche qui donne des résultats et qui marche, pourquoi changer?
Simon is the former Grand Chief of Kanesatake. He says he posted his candidacy in the spirit of healthy competition.
I bring a different voice, sometimes a little forceful, but I think it's needed.
Picard wants to hold the federal government accountable to their promises, like Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller's pledge of handing back traditional lands to First Nations.
C'est un engagement qui mérite d'être testé et pour moi, c'est vraiment quelque chose que j'entends faire auprès du gouvernement fédéral.
Picard will also continue to pressure the Quebec government to adopt Indigenous legislation.
C'est également l'objectif que nous poursuivons au niveau de la PNQS, c'est-à-dire de continuer à faire valoir ces points-là au niveau du racisme systémique, en dépit de la position du gouvernement du Québec qui préfère s'isoler.
Simon wants to try a new approach, taking nation-to-nation relationships internationally. His resistance to the Energy East pipeline developed into an international pipeline treaty.
I realized that I couldn't possibly fight this monster. And also with the consultation processes of Canada were so unfair to First Nations people.
He found out later that the treaty could have been written into international law, which he hopes to do with future agreements between First Nations.
Well, this would be very helpful because no third party like Quebec or Canada can intervene in this treaty between us. So there's opportunities there to exploit for the benefit of First Nations people. So on all fronts of any kind of trade we want to do amongst each other.
Regardless of the election outcome, Simon and Picard are looking forward to working together.
Serge, c'est une personne que j'ai toujours respectée. On a toujours travaillé très étroitement ensemble.
It's an honor even to just stand there in the same competition with Ghislain. So either way, I've already won.
The Quebec and Labrador chiefs will elect their new regional chief on January 25th. Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
The Mi'kmaq First Nations in Nova Scotia are developing their own health authority. Last week, it got a boost from Indigenous Services Canada. They will receive almost $9 million in funding over the next 2 years. The Mi'kmaq Health Authority is called Dudjigamic, meaning to be healthy. It has been in development for the last 10 years and will serve the 13 First Nations of Nova Scotia to build a system to deliver health services that reflect Mi'kmaq culture. Sharon Rutterham is the director at Dudjigamic. She says the current health system does not understand community needs.
We continue to face stereotyping. We continue to face racism in the healthcare setting. And there's really a lack of understanding around the historical traumas that have impacted our people. And also to add to that, the lack of translation services that are currently available, for Indigenous people, or for the Mi'kmaq people in Nova Scotia specifically.
After an alarming spike in drug-related deaths in the Yukon, the territorial government declared a substance use health emergency last week. But as Sarah Connors tells us, reaction to the new declaration is mixed, and some Yukoners are doubtful real change will happen. Here's that story.
Today, I am declaring a substance use health emergency in the Yukon Territory.
In the wake of 8 drug-related deaths in the Yukon this month, Health Minister Tracy Ann McPhee says the government is committed to taking action. Last week, she announced territorial officials are working on several harm reduction initiatives in response to the emergency. That includes a new public awareness campaign and an expansion of substance use programs. Today, the AFN Yukon Regional Office stated in a written release, the AFN Yukon region welcomes the territorial government's acknowledgement and willingness to take these mental health and addictions issues seriously and looks forward to working with federal partners to address the urgent and long-term needs of communities. But it's a little too late for Carcross-Tagish First Nation elder Geraldine Carroll James.
Well, it was an emergency a lot long ago.
James struggled with addiction and lost her daughter to alcohol 2 years ago. She says the government has been too slow to act, and she's doubtful real change will come from the declaration.
So the whole thing about this, about the opiate crisis and all of this, it should have been done years ago. First Nations should have helped them, had helped the minute they got out of residential school.
She's also frustrated the declaration doesn't include more supports for communities, like access to 24/7 counseling and a supervised consumption site.
Why aren't the communities involved? Why don't we have help here at 4 in the morning? Why don't we have a non-safe site, whatever, right?
It's still really unclear about what exactly that was.
John's concerns are echoed by Lindsay Amato, who's also from the Carcross-Tagish First Nation. Amato organized a territory-wide addictions and mental health vigil earlier this month. She says the declaration is a good first step, but she's concerned it's too vague.
So our concern now is that what are the timelines for these supports? You know, is this going to drag on and on and on? And in the meantime, are we still going to continue losing people?
The declaration is not a state of emergency, but a commitment to respond to the substance use crisis. It doesn't grant the territorial government any additional powers like a state of emergency would. Amato says she's disappointed an actual state of emergency has not been declared.
If the government would have declared like a state of emergency, like a full state of emergency, things would start happening right away. That's what we feel. But it doesn't really seem like that happened.
As for James, she'll believe it when she sees it.
That's enough of hearing and talking. There's got to be call for action.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Carcross and Whitehorse.
All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come. Inuit living in Ottawa don't have to go north of 60 for their traditional foods.
Today we are giving out country food such as matcha, caribou, and Arctic char.
Welcome back to APTN National News. For the first time, a First Nation in Manitoba has its own child and family services legislation. On Friday, Peguis First Nations CFS legislation officially came into effect. Community leaders and dignitaries were on hand to mark the historic occasion. Titled Honoring Our Children, Families and Nation, the act is national in scope and allows Peguis members to receive care wherever they reside in Canada. The legislation has a focus on prevention so families can receive supports to remain together. Peguis CFS Executive Director Clement Hornbrook says children will no longer have to fight.
Our people have fought for our children for a very long time. And it is our children that have taken the brunt. It is our children that have suffered. And today, they will not have to fight. They will not have to fight us. We will lift them up. We will lift up our mothers, our fathers. We hear our grandmothers.
Several First Nations in Alberta want to go big in the energy sector, and they've created 2 new Indigenous-run partnerships to invest millions. APTN's Chris Stewart has the story.
4 Alberta communities, the Enoch Cree Nation, Alexander First Nation, Paul First Nation, and the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation have joined to create the First Nation Capital Investment Partnership. Alexander First Nation and the new Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations Grand Chief George Arcan Jr. says he wants to invest in new projects that are environmentally sustainable, oil and gas, or renewables.
So we thought it'd be an opportunity for us to work together to see if we could find ways to ensure that we could increase economic opportunity that are balanced with some of our principles. And we were able to come to agreement to do that.
With a minimum investment of $50 million per project, Arcan Jr. says the investment will benefit communities for future generations.
And we're also interested in other projects within our territory that allow us to be a bigger partner and player. We're not interested in small projects. We're interested in what we consider bigger ideas, new projects that are being planned. We get in early. We spend time working with the business or the government to ensure that all of the industry pieces are being met.
On Monday, Chief Tony Alexis of the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation also announced a second partnership called Nasika Services. The nonprofit group wants to buy a stake in the multi-billion-dollar Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is currently owned by the federal government. The group wants to sign as many of the 129 Indigenous communities that are along the pipeline.
We have 14. The membership continues to grow. There's a non-binding letter that they can sign. There's also an MOU that they could sign to participate as part of the board of directors.
Chief Alexis says the investment will also benefit the communities that participate. With oil averaging 60% higher price in a year, there could be a good return.
We are helping coordinate and facilitate the financial transaction that's needed, organizing a group and a team that will have that high level of sophistication to make sure a project of this magnitude is done in a way that benefits the First Nation communities.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Cree and Inu chiefs in northern Quebec signed off on a historic memorandum of understanding about the caribou hunt to protect it for generations to come. Like the George River herd, which only has around 8,100 caribou left. Amelia Fournier has more.
The Cree Nation of Iu-Ishi and the Innu Nation hosted a virtual signing of a traditional mutual understanding on the caribou harvest. It's the result of years of collaboration and discussion between Indigenous nations in northern Quebec. It establishes how Innu will be able to access caribou on the traditional Cree territory of Chisasibi Iu-Ishi and to prevent herd numbers from dwindling further. Also, for a community hunt to be accepted by the Cree and Inu, hunters must adhere to the agreement's terms, including a winter harvest limit of 300 caribou for the 9 Innu communities and a prohibition of for-profit hunting.
The reason why we call this historic event a mutual understanding between two nations is because during the many meetings over the years regarding the caribou file, our elders continuously reminded us of what our ancestors did long ago. They made efforts to understand one another.
Inuit living in Ottawa don't have to go north of 60 for their traditional foods. An Inuit organization in the city is giving them greater access to the so-called country food. APTN's Fraser Needham reports on this new food security program.
Come rain, shine, or even snow, they line up each week. They're members of Ottawa's Inuit community. They're queuing up for foods they could no longer see on their plates anymore. But since last August, Tungasawa Inuit has been providing them with what they are looking for.
Today we are giving out country food such as mutta, caribou, and Arctic char.
Rhonda Huno is TI's food security manager. She says interest continues to grow in the program.
The first week we opened, we served 30 people. And now we're serving about 100 people a week. That can vary from 75 to our highest number, which was 155 people that we served the week after Christmas.
Billy Akavak is one of the leads in the food security program. He says Inuit people would normally access traditional foods during community gatherings, but since COVID began almost 2 years ago, the Inuit community has not held a single feast.
Being in contact with other Inuit is very important, but it's hard with COVID. It's really nice to see Inuit picking up country food from us. Makes people really happy.
A 2022 Canada Food Price Report says Canadians can expect to pay 5 to 7% more for their groceries this year. Along with the pandemic, Huno says rapidly rising food prices are creating problems for Ottawa's Inuit community.
So when we were on our full lockdown and we only delivered from home, we didn't have our eyes on the community for almost a year. And it's really important to have that connection. Again, when we reopened in August, you could tell that community members hadn't seen each other in a long time.
TI's food security program runs every Wednesday beginning at 10 a.m. Mornings are for elders, and the afternoons are for the general Inuit public. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Vanier.
The recent cold weather didn't stop dozens of frustrated Yellowknifers from gathering this weekend to protest COVID-19 public health restrictions. Our reporter Charlotte Mort Jacobs has that story.
A crowd of around 60 people gathered outside a federal government building in Yellowknife's downtown over the weekend.
After 2 years, my patience is up. I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I'm angry.
It was called a freedom rally, protesting COVID restrictions and calling for the right not to vaccinate. Similar rallies were held worldwide on Saturday. In Yellowknife, Christy W., who didn't want to give her full last name, works for an Indigenous organization. She's not vaccinated and hasn't been able to work.
So I'm currently on leave without pay since December. So I have till March 31st. If I choose to get the vaccine, then I'm able to go back to work.
She says she doesn't feel like her job should rely on whether or not she has gotten the shot.
If most of my coworkers are vaccinated, then how am I a dangerous threat to my workplace and to the people there? And if I choose to wear a mask all day, and if I choose to pay for my rapid test to be employed, I'm willing to do that.
Those who do not get vaccinated due to personal choice aren't protected under the NWT's Human Rights Act. In the fall of 2021, some NWT businesses began requiring proof of vaccination in response to public health orders, which granted increased capacity limits with vaccination. By November, the territorial government began requiring workers to provide proof of vaccination or to be tested regularly and wear a mask.
So I have a 3-year-old daughter who's in preschool, and just before the holiday, I was able to walk her to the door wearing a mask, hand her over to the teacher. The teacher brings her in, undresses her. I don't go in, and now I'm not even allowed to walk her to the door wearing a mask. There's no logic in me not be able to walk my daughter to the door when she's with me 24/7.
3/4 of NWTers are fully vaccinated and 84% partially vaccinated. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
We need to take one more break, but still ahead. A new app hopes to make communication easier in Indigenous communities.
You could create news notifications, you could create event notifications, you could create job notifications.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Pachapesia caught the sun just peeking over the horizon along the Alaskan Highway in northern British Columbia near Trutch and Bucking Horse River. Now be sure to tune in tomorrow. We received a number of photos from different viewers featuring birds, so you will not want to miss any of those as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning in the east, 0 degrees and snow in Charlottetown and +3 in Halifax. -25 in Nain and -19 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. -25 and a bit of snow in Val-d'Or and -10 and snow in Montreal. Sunshine and -20 in North Bay and -17 in Sault Ste. Marie. -27 and a mix of sun, cloud in Big Trout Lake and -21 in Thunder Bay. -25 in Churchill and -25 in Norway House. -20 in Winnipeg and -21 in Barons River. -15 and sunshine in Regina and -2 in North Battleford. -22 and sun in La Ronge and -30 in Stony Rapids. Moving over to the west, -26 in Fort Chipewyan and +2 in Peace River. 0 degrees in snow in Red Deer and +1 in snow in Lethbridge. +7 degrees in Victoria and a -2 in Quesnel. 0 degrees in Smithers and -2 in snow in Dease Lake. +1 in snow in Whitehorse and -17 in Old Crow. -15 in Trout Lake and -4 in Norman Wells. -6 in Fort McPherson and -4 in Tuktoyaktuk. -28 in Baker Lake and -28 in Chesterfield. -31 in Iqaluit and -30 in Clear in Resolute. An Alberta-based tech company hopes to fill communication gaps in Indigenous communities with a new app. Operators say the new technology makes it easier for band councils to contact members. Tamara Pimentel has this report.
This app was created for registration forms, job opportunities.
This app called Communicate was created by Avia, a software development company in Edmonton. It was built specifically for the needs of Indigenous communities.
You could create news notifications, you could create event notifications, you could create job notifications.
Community leadership can use the app to instantly notify members on and off reserve, and even be used to send documents or applications. That way, no one is left out.
You can select who you want to send it out to. You can send it out privately, so just me and yourself. You could also create groups as well. So you can send it to the health department, the education department, the administration department, the on-reserve members, the off-reserve members.
Daryl Breton Jr. of Saddle Lake Cree Nation is the business development specialist at Avia. He helped them develop Communicate. He says using Facebook to communicate works, but it doesn't send push notifications to members, and the app also avoids negative comments in posts.
It's just a one-tap instant access. I don't have to open up my phone, go to my Facebook app, type in Saddle Lake Cree Nation Facebook page, and then scroll and see what's new on the Facebook page and what's fresh. I can actually just get notified on my phone from my Saddle Lake Cree Nation app.
Just under 30 communities in Western Canada are currently using Communicate. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Certainly something to keep an eye on with that app. That's all we have for you tonight on this Monday edition of APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you very much for joining us and have a great night.